Hello, and welcome to the X Point YouTube channel. Today we have a match from the finals of the New England Old School June 2024 tournament. New England Old School is an old school Magic club based out of, well, New England, obviously. They run a monthly tournament series through Facebook. They switch up the formats each month. In June, they decided to go with X Points. As a refresher, X Points is an old school variant that uses the Atlantic rule set as well as a point system. So 30 or so cards are assigned a point value, and then your deck can contain up to 10 points. The finals of this June tournament featured two classic X-Point archetypes. We have Mono Black versus Troll Disco. So without further ado, let's get to the decks. First up, we have the deck of Nick. He is playing a Mono Black mid-range deck. And the first thing you should note is the card that is not here, and that is Hymn to Turak. Hymn to Turak is a very popular card in X-Points, especially in Black. Nick has decided not to play a heavy discard route and instead focuses on attacking with big creatures. So he has 4 Juzams, 4 Sengers, and then 1 Nightmare as his giant creature. Nightmare is definitely a card that does not see enough play, probably in any format, but certainly not in X-Points. His smaller creatures, 4 Orders of the Ebon Hand, 4 Hypnotic Specters, and 2 Royal Assassins. In place of the hymns, Nick has some acceleration in terms of Dark Ritual, Black Lotus, Mox Jet, and then he has some control elements, Icy Manipulator, Sinkhole, Drain Life, and Terror. So all in all, he's looking to play like a medium-long game, unless, of course, he can slam like a turn 1 Juzam, in which case the game will be over very quickly. For points, instead of hymns, which most Black decks use their points on, he has spent 3 points on a Lotus, 2 points on a Mox Jet, 4 points on a Mizra's Factory, and then 1 point on a Maze of Ith hiding in the sideboard. And to speak to his sideboard for a little bit, he definitely can morph into a more controlling deck, bringing in Discs, Will of the Wisps, Gloom if he's playing against a white deck, Greed to draw more cards, and a Control Mirror or Underworld Dreams to punish the opponent for drawing too many cards, and then a Maze of Ith just to slow the game down. All in all, Nick's deck seems very versatile. It can be aggressive if it needs to be. It can have some amazing starts with a turn 1 Senger or turn 1 Juzam. And then after sideboarding, he can get a lot more control-ish if he needs to be. I'm not sure if he'll need that in this matchup, but we'll see. Up next, we have my deck, which is a version of Troll Disco. I've actually been working on this for a couple of years and settled on a version that I am fairly comfortable with. You'll notice right away in the top left corner, I have included 4 Hymn to Turak. It costs 8 points, which is more than in years past, so definitely not cheap in terms of points to go in an X-Point deck, but sometimes you can just end the game on turn 2 if you hymn away the right 2 cards. That doesn't lead to the most fun games, but it does help you win, and in this situation, we are erring on the side of winning over the side of having fun. For 2 drops, I have decided to go with Kumbaj Witches over Order of the Ebon Hand. One of this deck's biggest weaknesses is very aggressive matchups, and so the Witches help in those greatly. They kill basically everything in a mono green deck. They kill Savannah Lions, Icatian Javelineers, and then the other thing that this deck has a problem with is killing a Senger Vampire. And so the Witches help out with that as well. You can bolt and then use 1 witch, or you can block with a Hypnotic Spectre and use 2 witches. These witches have definitely earned their spot in this deck over the last 2 or 3 years. The rest of the deck's pretty standard. We have 4 Sedge Trolls, 4 Hypnotic Spectres, 3 Senger Vampires, and 1 Demonic Hordes as the rest of the creature set. I love including Demonic Hordes as like a safety valve against decks that have 4 Maze of Ith, for example, or decks that are like 5 color playing really greedy mana bases. If the game goes long enough and the hordes survive, it basically wins on its own in a way that sometimes like Shivan Dragon just won't, especially against 5 color control where they have COP red. I also only run 2 discs instead of 4. Usually when your opponent sees you play Badlands and Sedge Troll, they assume your deck has 4 discs in it, and so they'll hold cards back. Them holding cards back is just about as good as you destroying the cards. Also, Disc is often a very terrible top deck in the late stages of the game when you're just trying to finish your opponent off. Rest of the deck's just 2 terrors, Shatter, Chaos Orb, Fireball, Jalem Tome, Drain Life, a couple of Sinkholes, just rounding out with some very control-ish spells. There's also 2 Ebon Strongholds. Those probably won me as many games by letting me cast a turn 4 Send Your Vampire, as they cost me by coming into play tapped in, letting me cast a turn 6 Send Your Vampire. So play them at your own risk. I used them as a hedge against Karma, which I did not face even once. For my points, I have spent the 8 points on the aforementioned hymns, and then last 2 points on Mishra's Factories. Those would almost certainly be a Mox Jet if I owned one, but alas, still powerless, so in go to Factories. In terms of the sideboard, just have a lot more answers, basically. 2 Shatters, 2 Blood Moons, a Terror, 2 City in a Bottle, which will be good against Juzams, Falling Star, Sinkhole, Disc, Drain Life, and Dreams. Other than the City in the Bottle, not too much looks good against Nick's deck, at least from where I'm sitting now a couple months later. I'm not 100% sure what I sideboarded, but we will see, and it makes me a little nervous because this deck has a hard time with large black creatures, and the sideboard doesn't necessarily help with that. But we'll see if we can overcome those deficits. Let's get to the match. Okay, game number 1 here. Nick is taking a mulligan, going down to 6 cards. I've kept my 7. Start with a Swamp. Nick also starts with a Swamp. And here we have the Swamp and Hymn to Turak. So we'll see if we can get the game over this early. Nick still has 6 in hand. We're going to take 2 of them. See what they are. The first 2, we got a Hypnotic Spectre and a Swamp. And that was Nick's only other land. So this is what I'm talking about. Oh, and there's another hymn. So sort of adding insult to injury here. We'll see. Obviously, Nick's not sandbagging any more lands, so this is all going to be gas. We've got 2 Sinkholes. It should be noted that while Hymn is a terribly unfun card, had I not hymned away Nick's Swamp, we're both short on mana, so he would have had 2 Sinkholes, and it would have been an unfun game. In the other direction, speaking of that, here's the 3rd Hymn to Turak, and this is really not an argument for not banning, restricting, or adding points to him, because I'm just ripping apart Nick's hand. He was a great sport about it. He's commenting on all the fun cards in his graveyard that he would have gotten to cast. There's a Hypnotic Spectre. Hopefully we'll take apart the rest of his hand. See Nick getting ready. There's nothing in his deck for 1 black mana that can stop the Spectre, so I'm going to steal an Icy Manipulator there. And there's the Kumbach Witches coming down. Not quite as aggressive as I would like right now when Nick doesn't have that many cards left in his hand. I would really like for to draw creatures and end the game as quickly as possible before he can recover or play a giant creature of himself. The hippie is going to continue ripping apart his hand. Witches get in. He doesn't block with the Factory, probably for fear of Lightning Bolt or Shatter. He really needs the lands. And there's a Dark Ritual into a Juzam, so that is going to stop my Witches in their tracks for a little bit. We'll see if I have... I don't even know what I have. Oh, so this is what I was talking about in the deck tech. I ping the Juzam for 1 with the Witches, fireball it for 4. Otherwise, I would not have been able to kill it. So there are the Witches earning their spot in this game 1. Although, to be fair, Hymn to Turak did most of the work here. Hitting again, taking Nick down to 10. He discards yet another Sinkhole, draws a card that's not a land, and decides to scoop him up. We'll move on to game 2. Okay, game 2. I have taken a mulligan to 5, as represented by that 5 dice, and Nick has taken a mulligan to 5 as well. So this will definitely, or almost certainly, be off to a slow start. As a hymn player, I love seeing my opponent mulligan to 5. It's just very hard to mulligan against a deck that is playing for Hymn to Turak. Nick has basically hymned himself. To be fair, I have also hymned to myself, so it's at least even from this point. Nick starts with a Swamp. I have my own Swamp, pass back. Nick with his second swamp, and sinkholes, my swamp. So that's about as unfair as him to Turak, at least as the person getting sinkholed. That's what I'm going to say right now. Nick with a factory and a Will-o'-the-Wisp, which surprised me. I did not think he would bring those in, but I guess against the disc deck, they do regenerate, and they block trolls and vampires all day. They're not very aggressive, but I don't think Nick's plan is to be especially aggressive. At least not right now. Nick's thinking he played a second swamp, and it's Hypnotic Spectre. It is. So hopefully I have a lightning bolt for it, and I do. Bolt the hippie, as they say. They don't say that. A factory of my own, and run out a troll without regeneration mana. I basically know that Nick has terrors and no real way to damage the troll, right? So it doesn't really matter that I've left up regeneration mana. Nick did have the terror, so he was able to remove the troll. He comes in with a factory, pumps it for 3, and I'm down to 17. 3 cards in hand, play a Badlands and a disc. So that's going to be a little tricky because it doesn't blow up anything at this point, though it can deter Nick from swinging with the factories. He gets in 1 swing before the disc is active. Take 4 and fall to 13. Nick thinking about whether he wants to play any more cards. Decides not to. Leave up mana to regenerate his Will-o'-the-Wisp. I have a swamp. Let's see if I come in with my own factory. I do not. Just pass back. 5 mana, disc activation up. So Nick can't really attack with his 2 factories, or those would die to the disc, and it would set him back on mana pretty substantially. He would keep the Wisp as long as he could regenerate it. Knowing that, Nick just plays a land and passes. I have my own land, and let's see if I have any action. I do not. Pass back. Nick draws his card for the turn. Taps for agreed. Okay, that might be worth blowing the disc for. Nick plays a swamp, so he now has the ability to draw 3 cards. He can basically ancestral himself, but at the cost of 6 life. I think I have to pop this disc pretty soon because I don't really have any way of drawing additional cards in this deck, and that greed is going to run away with the game if I cannot remove it soon. Clearly, I think that's what I'm thinking here. If I pop the disc, yep, and I'll pop it, blowing up the greed. In response, Nick's going to draw a card, take 2, fall to 18. He'll almost certainly draw another card. Especially my deck is not particularly aggressive. That's the trouble. Oh, he casts a Dark Ritual. All right, so now he has 3 black mana floating. He can draw. That almost is an Ancestral Recall there. See, I knew that cycle was all fair and balanced and even. So he draws 2. Still got 1 black mana floating. Is he going to draw? Yes. So he's drawn 4 cards off the greed at the cost of 8 life, but that seems fine for him right now. He regenerates his Will-o'-the-Wisp, and I trade a disc in what's basically a, I don't know, 1 for 1, but also -4. At least now I can play out my own threats without worrying about the disc. So this looks like perhaps a Hypnotic Spectre. Yep. Doesn't look that good on this board since Nick can block it with the Wisp all day long. This is where, again, I don't have a good way to remove Will-o'-the-Wisp for good. Right, I have a Fireball instead of Disintegrate. Sinkholing a factory. Maybe trying to keep Nick off of his mana a little bit. Also, I can save my Lightning Bolts for his Hypnotic Spectres. But Nick, he has, I think, 5 in hand now? Life totals are pretty even, but I am out of cards. Nick has a perfect blocker for my Hypnotic Spectre. He has 6 mana available and kind of do whatever he wants now. Swings in with the factory. I just have to take it and fall to 11. Second main phase, Nick's gonna sinkhole my factory. So now I don't have a good blocker for the factory either, and then he Dark Rituals out a Juzam, plays a Maze of Ith, and I am pretty far behind at this point. That greed was phenomenal. See if I can make some sort of comeback. Can't even really swing with the hippie because even though he doesn't have regeneration mana for the Wisp up, he does have the maze. Nick takes one from his Juzam. At this point, maybe I'm hoping to stall long enough to burn him out. He swings with the factory in the Juzam. I block the factory with my hippie and fall to 6. So at least that's 2 more swings of the Juzam. Nick's thinking with 1 card in hand. Plenty of defense up with the Maze of Ith and the Will of the Wisp. Plenty of offense in the Djinn. I guess trying to decide what to do with his last card. Asking what's in my graveyard. And we'll see. Decides to play a Strip Mine, which is a little dangerous because yeah, he gave me enough mana to drain life his Juzam. Yeah, that was an interesting play on Nick's part. I know he's probably waiting for another factory to use the Strip Mine on, but he did give me enough mana to kill the Juzam. I'm back in the game, but there's a Sendra Vampire, and I've used basically one of my only ways to kill it in the Drain Life. I'll probably have 1 more Drain Life and 1 more Fireball in the deck, but take 4 from the Vampire, fall to 7. 2 cards in hand. Let's see. City in a Bottle, which would have been good against the Djinn. Does nothing against the Vampire. Drew those cards in the wrong order. Fall to 3 from the Vampire. And draw my card. Will this kill the Vampire? Is it my lone Fireball? It is not. Scoop them up, and the series is tied. We'll move on to game number 3. Okay, here we are for game 3. I will be on the play. Clearly, I've already gone to 6 and am thinking hard about mulliganing to 5, but I keep 6 and start off with the Swamp. See if we can get some of that turn 2 Hymn to Turak again. Always much better on the play than on the draw. He's thinking, plays a Factory and a Jet. Pass the turn. I have a Swamp, but not a Hymn or a Sinkhole. So that is definitely a questionable keep, which is probably why I was hemming and hawing in the beginning. It's a Badlands and a Hypnotic Spectre. Nick draws. Plays the Swamp, or at least almost plays the Swamp. He's thinking perhaps he has another Factory, perhaps he has a Lotus. There's no real reason to save your lands in hand, especially against a deck with Hypnotic Spectre and Hymn to Turak. You could also be thinking about Drain Lifing the hippie. And instead he plays a Juzam, so it's going to be a little tough for me to deal with if I don't have a bottle. Go ahead and swing with the hippie, because it's probably not blocking. It's worth the card. And with 5 cards in hand, I get a Swamp. And there's a Disc. So there's one of my answers to Juzams. And Nick doesn't have a good way of removing a Disc. Obviously, I'd rather have a bottle in this scenario. But Nick's going to swing in with both of his creatures, hit me for 7, and I am down to 11. So this could be a quick game if Nick plays out a Maze and a Will of the Wisp. So something not only to block the hippie, but something that will survive a Disc activation. Notably, my Disc would get his Mox Jet, but he doesn't seem to be too light on lands this game, so I don't know how helpful that will be. I have 3 cards in hand. I just pass the turn. Nick takes 1 from the Juzam. And swings in. I'll block with the hippie, buy myself another turn. And this is the problem that I was talking about in the deck tag with the 4 discs, like Nick knows I have an active discount. He doesn't have to play anything. I'm going to have to pop this disc. So you don't necessarily want 4. When I pass the turn back, he'll take 1 from the Juzam, fall to 15. And I have to blow the disc here. So not the best value, but I don't have many other good ways of killing that Juzam. Nick regenerates his Will of the Wisp and then comes out with his own Hypnotic Spectre. So the discarder is hoping to become the discardee, I guess. Or, I'm not sure if that's right, but it makes sense in my head. There's another disc. Remember, I only have 2 discs, maybe 3 after sideboarding. So it hurts a little bit to blow 2 of my possibly 3 discs this early in the match. But I don't want to lose it to the Hypnotic Spectre if I don't have another way to get rid of it. Which, based on that play, I assume I do not. And I'm taking 2. Nick's getting a card. I'm fall to 9. Nick takes a mountain, so I appear to be a little bit flooded here. It's one of the reasons the Jalem Tome is in the deck. If you make it past turn 7 with a Troll Disco deck, in my experience, you're most likely to die to just flooding out. So, and I have a Bolt for the Hippie, 1 turn too late. Still gets a card, but I don't take the damage. And the threat is neutralized, at least for the time being. See if Nick has a follow-up play. It's another Swamp. And his own disc. Okay, this is very interesting now because we're sort of playing disc chicken, right? Like, Nick doesn't want to hold cards in his hand. He can blow a disc to blow my disc. I have a him, though. To get some of those cards he's been holding in his hand, he keeps the first one, discards the last 2, a Juzam and a Terror. Okay, so that's another way I can deal with the Juzam. Just have him discard it before it gets out. We'll see if that's good enough. Obviously, if Nick has like another Djinn or he has a Vampire or something, he might want to blow the disc now so he can deploy his own threats. And he does, yeah. He pops the disc. So in response, I'm gonna pop my own disc. At least then he has to regenerate the Will of the Wisp twice, and he just decides it's not worth it. He's gonna spend his mana in other ways, sinkholing the factory, and getting in for 2 with his own factory. So he's on the offense here. It's got me to 7. We know he has 3 or 4 Drain Lives in his deck. He has some Dark Rituals in there, so I am relatively close to dead. There's my 3rd disc from the sideboard. I am not getting a lot of value out of these as he swings with the factory, and I can't blow the disc yet. So I fall to 5, and there's another Will of the Wisp. These discs are just looking awful in this match. To be fair, I don't have a lot of other ways to kill some of his creatures. So this is... I'm going to have to be very careful with what I do with this last disc. Hopefully I have a Shatter or a Lightning Bolt or a Sinkhole for this factory. If I don't, it's not going to matter. And there's his own disc again, so he has the same play as before. He's just using his discs to blow up mine, kind of force the issue, which will allow him to deploy some of his bigger threats. But that's his second of 3 discs as well. So we'll see. I think notably nobody has any way to get cards back from the graveyard. And we can do the same dance of double disking. This time he is going to regenerate his Wisp twice. I'm like pointing that out. I guess he doesn't, but I don't think it matters here. That Maze and the Wisp are holding off the Vampire pretty well. There's his own Vampire, so at the very least, my Vampire can block and kill his. See what I have here. Can't really attack. He could trade off Vampires if he wanted to. See, I'm counting my mana, hopefully for something big. There's a drain life for 4 on the vampire, so I'll go back up to 9, give myself a little bit of breathing room. Still can't really attack because of the maze. I need to find a sinkhole. I need to find a way to kill the will-o'-the-wisp, of which I have none. There's another vampire from Nick, so he is keeping up the pressure. Now that is my sideboard drain life, because my main deck one is black bordered, so I know I have at least one more drain life in there. I have a fireball as well. Not completely dead to these vampires, but the game has stalled out a little bit. Nick, I don't think, has played any of his drain lives, so I have to be cautious of that. And there's the Jalem Tome I was talking about. Be able to cycle through some cards here. Yeah, do it right away. Apparently my hand is hot garbage, maybe. Yep, draw a card and discard a mountain. Still can't attack. Hopefully there's no drain life from Nick, and we'll see what he comes in with. Swings with the vampire, block with my own vampire. So that's 2 vampires down a piece, I think. We're looking through graveyards. I guess only one, so we have 2 vampires left then. Nick's just asking what's in his graveyard. It is important to note that the NEOS tournaments are open deck lists, so we both have each other's deck up on a second monitor, so that we know sort of what's been used up. Nick's just kind of confirming that, like, all my discs are gone. He has free reign to cast whatever he wants. That's going to be a sinkhole on the Badlands. So he's out of cards here. I'm not out of the woods. But I don't have a way to stop his 2 factories, and I don't really have a way to get through the will-o'-the-wisp. Well, there's a sinkhole for one of the factories. And a Hypnotic Spectre, which, again, can't get through. You can argue there that I should have sinkholed the Maze of Ith. I sinkholed that factory very quickly, and obviously I'm at 9, I'm worried about dying. But the best way to not die is to just win, and that maze is really stopping me from winning, or slowing it down at least. Nick just drew a swamp for turn. He plays it out. Remember, he knows I have 4 hymns, one of which I discard to the tome there, and he also has 4 drain lives, so all of his swamps need to be in play for him. There's no reason for him to hold them back. It's another factory. All right, so the pressure could be mounting soon, although to be fair, my factory can block either of his. I'm going to use the little book again. Draw and discard. Yet another hymn, so 3 hymns in the graveyard. This is where they're not necessarily worth the points once it's, turn 20 or whatever it is. And your opponent is out of cards. There's a Chaos Orb. We have not had an orb flip in any of these matches, despite both of us playing Chaos Orb. I feel like I'm going to have to save that for a Juzam. But I could be wrong. I could get aggressive and try to use it on the maze. We'll see. He's going to swing with 1 factory. So I can activate my factory, pump and trade with his, because he could pump his with his untapped factory. I don't know. He does play 2 more factories than I do, so trading factories is a medium idea at best. Obviously, it'd be much better if I had a lightning bolt or a shatter here. I don't. And Nick lets the factories trade off. He doesn't do any funny Maze of Ith tricks. He doesn't want to save his factory. He just wants to get out so he can play another vampire. So that's probably where that Chaos Orb is going. See Nick kind of hunching forward. He's in top deck mode. I'm in top deck mode, but with a tome. We'll see. There's an orb flip and it's a hit. The vampire's down. All right. We'll see if I can mount what feels like a comeback here, even though the game now is fairly stabilized. And I have the little book going, so hopefully can draw a little better. Nick flipping through his graveyard, just confirming what's in there. Imagine I'm asking about factories. Yeah, so I'm sinkholing another factory. Again, There's an argument to stripping the maze, or sinkholing the maze. He plays a Spectre, which bounces off my Spectre for the time being. I'll draw out the book, discard, Shatter, which again could have been used to kill a factory. So again, it's pretty late at night. Nick's on the West Coast, and I'm on the East Coast, so there's a time difference. We have to like both sort of accommodate each other. He comes in with the hippie, I immediately block, and he follows it up with the greed. So this is arguably what won him game 2, and to see it here in game 3 is disappointing. Again, I have nothing damaging him right now. He's still at 15 life. Oh, and there's the demonic hordes. All right. So we're going all in on demonic hordes, hopefully. Nick's gonna draw 4 cards, or 2 cards, sorry. Pay 4 life to draw 2 cards, go to 11. He has 1 disc left to deal with the hordes. Other than that, assuming that he sided out the Royal Assassins, the hordes has free reign. I guess he could Dark Ritual drain life if he has that, and that would be unfortunate for me. It would put him back up to 16 and allow him to draw even more cards with greed. He could also just simply play a swamp and drain life. It's counting his mana, so I'm obviously not feeling too good about that, but if I can knock out 1 or 2 of his lands. He draws with the greed, so maybe he's searching for that Dark Ritual or the drain life. There's a swamp, which looks like the card he drew off the greed. It's at 9 apiece. He has... Let's see. Thinking about tapping 2. This could be Ritual Drain Life. Could be another vampire. It's doing enough counting, though, that it very much feels like Drain Life. There's a Dark Ritual, yep. 2 black, 5 others, and the Demonic Hordes is gone. And Nick goes back to 14, so he can keep refilling his hand with greed, at least for a little while. I do have a Fireball left. I have Lightning Bolts, assuming I left those in, which I probably would have for the hippies and the factories. So I can hope now that Nick is too greedy, pun intended, because greed definitely trumps a little book in this scenario. We'll see. We have seen no trolls yet, although a troll wouldn't even be good on this board. So I discard a Hypnotic Spectre to the little book. Again, just not that relevant against a Maze and a Will-o'-the-Wisp. Nick's gonna draw 1 with the greed, fall to 12, still at a very comfortable life total. He also knows I don't play Dark Ritual, so I can Fireball him for 6 max with the Stronghold. So he can pay at least 4 more life safely. I guess I could also have Lightning Bolts, only one of which is in my graveyard. Nick, to his credit, played this very carefully. He's always keeping track of the cards that were left in my deck. The cards that are left in his deck. This was actually quite a fun match to play. Both players thinking very carefully. There's a Drain Life, which again is just going to be more cards for Nick. He drains me for 6, I fall to 3. He drains me for 5, so leaving up mana for Will-o'-the-Wisp regeneration, or perhaps drawing a card with the greed. So he's at 17, I'm at 4. I don't like my chances here, but we shall see. 2 cards in hand, can use the little book if I want to, which I do. Yep. I don't 100% know what I'm searching for here. but it's definitely not a swamp, so we discard that one. And again, this is for the June championship, so both players taking their time. I him away his last card. I can't really wait for him to get it with the greed. It's an order, which I was surprised he left in, because I do play the witches. Maybe he assumed I would take the witches out. Maybe he just didn't have something else to bring in. Hard to say. He does draw a card with the greed, though, falls to 15. And now he can just draw a boatload of cards if he wants to. And there's a nightmare. All right. So, talking about my deck's inability to destroy large black creatures, that's the largest of them. It's currently a 9/9. I don't know that I can deal with a 9/9, and certainly can't with this board. That nightmare is quite good. We'll see if it's good enough for the game. I do have a draw, but my orb is gone. All of my discs are gone. A sinkhole, okay. So now it's an 8/8, but I'm at 4, so I'm still dead. And there's a hippie who was probably going to sacrifice himself here. Nick draws with the greed, falls to 13. Still very safely out of fireball, drain life range. This is looking very good for Nick. Swings with the nightmare. Again, a 9/9 thanks to the swamp, or an 8/8 still, sorry, he did not play a swamp. Plays a hippie. Sinkholes, Ebb and Stronghold. So I have virtually no outs against a nightmare. I can draw one extra card with the tome, if that's relevant in any way. And there's a vampire. Okay, so again, vampire can chump the nightmare. Nick's gonna draw with the greed. Draw for the turn. Swings in. I'll block the nightmare. Lose a sinkhole to the hippie. I need a miracle. Looking, and no. All right, so Nick takes it down. He becomes the June 2024 NEOS champion on the back of Nightmare, which is awesome to see. Like, I think we were talking here where I'm sad that I lost, but I can't be too sad that I lost to Nightmare, which is a pretty awesome card. And Nick used it to great effect. He sideboarded great, brought in the wisps and his own discs to force me to use my discs. We're looking here at the sideboarding, what happened. I brought in 2 sinkholes, drain life, disc, and 2 bottles. Nick brought in wisp, disc, drain life, and maze. He took out the orders. He did take out 3 of the orders, and he commented here that he just forgot that he had a 4th one, or like missed it. Probably would have left in an icy maybe instead, but he took out the royals, the orders, and the ices in a well-played game. So congratulations to Nick, the June 2024 NEOS X-Point champion. That concludes today's match. If you would like more information about the X-Point format, head over to our website, xpointoldschool.com, where you can find information about the rule set as well as the monthly tournament series run through Talaria. If you would like to have your match featured on this channel, head over to our Discord or Facebook page and get in touch with a member of the media team who can help you get that process started. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content just like this, and as always, thanks for watching.